Welcome everyone to today's webinar, part of a 12-part series put together by M2E. We want to thank you all for being here today. We're going to get started in just about 30 seconds. We're going to give all our participants an opportunity to log in. We do welcome you to go ahead and use the Q&A at the bottom or top of your screen, wherever Zoom is showing it for you. And feel free to put in your questions and we'll do our best to go ahead and answer those questions today. I do have the pleasure of being with a distinguished panel here today, M2E, GlobalPro, as well as Siegfried. We'll do our best to answer all your questions. Kindly use the Q&A. Last week, we spoke a little bit about kind of 30,000 foot of the 40 and 50 year recertification process. Today, we're gonna go over how we can get that process started. So if you give us just about another 10, 15 seconds, we'll get our webinar started. For those of you that are just coming in, please use the Q&A for any questions and answers or any questions that you'd like answered, I should say, throughout the webinar. We're going to be going through a series of questions as well as any questions that are provided in the Q&A. So why don't we get started here? So thank you all again for being here with us today. September is a really crazy month for our associations. We're dealing with hurricane seasons. We're dealing with budget season. And now we're also dealing with 40, 50 year recertifications or challenges within your particular county when it comes to certification process, and also making sure that your properties is up to par on whatever your city or county is doing at this time. So today's webinar, we're going to dig in a little bit more on the 40 and 50 year recertification process. So I'd like to go ahead and get an introduction for each one of our panelists here today. I'll start off with Nick from Siegfried. If you could say a little bit about yourself and the firm that you represent.
Sure. Thanks, Rafael. Nick Siegfried from law firm of Siegfried Rivera. We practice construction law, condominium law, and real estate in the South Florida area. I'm a board certified construction lawyer. I've been practicing construction law for about 16 years now. Teach construction law at University of Miami Law School. Handle primarily 558 turnover claims, do a lot of construction contracts, drafting of contracts, negotiating construction contracts on behalf of condominium associations. Basically, in terms of our construction practice, we handle claims, from the beginning, just from negotiating contracts to issues during construction to litigation at the end of a project, representing anybody from, contractors to associations. In the construction industry.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you for being with us here today. Next up, I have Daniel Odess with GlobalPro.
Thanks, Rafael, and thank you all our attendees and panelists. This is going to be a great webinar, panelist, whatever you want to call it. I'm president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery. We have managed more than $1 billion in recovery. We are insurance coverage experts. Our team is comprised of attorneys and licensed agents, engineers, contractors, all the service people that you need to assist you, whether it's from placing insurance to recovering from a loss. So we are your one-stop shop for insurance needs.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you for being with us. And last but not least, Misha with M2E.
Thank you, Rafael. Good morning, everybody. My name is Misha. My last name is unpronounceable. I'm the founder and president of M2E Consulting. I practiced construction-related engineering since 1981. So those of you who can calculate quickly, that's approximately 40 years. My firm is a full-service engineering firm that serves condominium primarily, but also developers and contractors. I'm an expert witness in construction litigation cases, on multiple ones. Whereas with actually Nick's firm, we have been successful in securing record awards for condominium associations in their lawsuits. Full service means that we have all of the disciplines in-house, and we are able to service the condominium in all of their engineering needs. Any question besides going on the Q&A, you can go to ask@m2e, like behind me, m2e.com. And we'll be glad to help you. Thank you again for inviting us to participate in this.
Thank you very much, Misha. As for myself, my name is Rafael Aquino. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Affinity Management Services. We are a community association management company which focus on managing both condos and homeowners associations throughout Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. So again, I want to thank you all for being here today. So today's webinar, we're going to focus a little bit on how we start. I know last week we went over kind of the high level process. So I wanted to take this opportunity to really ask the experts that we have here today on what steps they believe our board members and managers should be taking in order to get this 40-year, 50-year recertification process. So Misha, why don't we start it off with you? If you could kind of give us an idea of how a board or a manager should start the recertification process, and what should be the steps the association should be taking to embark in this recertification process.
Well, obviously, being an engineer, I start by what you should not do, right? And you should not wait at 39 years and 363 days to actually think about your 40 years recertification. The 40 years recertification is just a point in time. But realistically, we recommend to our clients the latest at 38 years to start planning for it. And this is the reason. There is several challenges that we will talk about at this seminar, but not the least being, one, you need to find an engineer who is actually a capable engineer. Number two, you need to give him time to actually assess what is going on in the property. Hopefully you maintained it reasonably over the last 40 years. And if you didn't, or if the people who were in power before you are in charge didn't, then you need the time to actually not only do the plans, select the contractor, but once that you do the plans, there will be actually a period that we strongly recommend you do investigation so that your plans reflect the actual problems that you have, as opposed to doing inspection with binoculars. That means that they will probably have to dig, crack, chip, and assert what is really going on. So at that point, you see how time starts clicking, right? So you decided to do it, you interviewed an engineer, you hired an engineer, the engineer visited the site, he discovered things that may not be that great, he generates a set of drawings, and then ideally you would think that you go to market and select a contractor. Wrong. Today, in today's market, contractors are extremely busy, and it's very difficult to secure one. So it's not when you want to have a contractor, is when the contractor really wants to work for you. So you go and you go through a selection process, you get a contractor, and he starts. All of what I just described is based on the ideal situation that magically all of the association has is an account with several hundreds of thousands or $1 million in it to pay for it, which is, I'm sure most of you don't, which means that you need time to secure financing. And Dan is much more familiar with that than I am. But the bottom line is that even the banks who used to like condominiums don't like them anymore. And it's very difficult to find financing. So you need time to find financing. And for what you're not going to finance, you need to have time to actually pass a special assessment that will actually finance it. Now that you see everything that is stacked up to happen, plus the actual construction, you see that 2 years is going to go like this. So first advice, whatever time you are between 0 and 40 years, think about how you're going to plan for it.
Correct. And I couldn't agree with you more, Misha. I know coming from from the management side, many times, board members are either new to the position or they've been there for a while, and they don't realize how long these processes do take. And that's where a strong, management partner, as well as engineering partner, attorney partner, or even PA partner can come in and give you the information that's necessary and truly guide you through the process. I know when you're going through a 40-year, we have kind of like a 10-step process. And that 10-step process, on the minimum, it's about 2 years, because between hiring your engineers, getting those RFPs together, having a discussion with GlobalPro to see if there's claims that could be made, reviewing, having your attorneys draft up the agreement or the potential agreements you're going to provide with the RFP. There's a ton of processes that must be followed in order for this to be successful. Because if you're just trying to rush through the situation, you're going to find yourself, missing a lot of hoops and also tripping throughout the process. Nick, could you kind of give our listeners a little bit of an idea when it comes to the legal side of it and what they should be keeping in mind? Misha mentioned special assessments. So what items should they be looking for? What potential liability could they have if they don't meet these requirements of the 40, 50-year recertification?
Sure, of course. So as board members, each board member has a fiduciary obligation to look out for the best interests of the association. So in terms of a 40-year recertification, I don't think there could be anything more important than this.
Yeah.
And it needs to start, hopefully it started early, as Misha mentioned. Hopefully it's not year 38 and somebody said, well, maybe we should start looking at this building. Hopefully it's been a process and the association has been performing their maintenance obligations on the building for the past 38 years. So let's just say we're in year 38. The board needs to start this process early because I think there's a potential for a special assessment if the reserves haven't been kept up. That's going to take time. It's money. Money is always an issue with associations. I mean, we all see that. There's politics around it. Somebody says it's going to cost X. That starts concerning people. You have people that potentially are in fixed budgets and may not be able to afford it. And so that's going to take time to happen and to get that funding in place. And you don't want to be, fighting with your residents about it, not able to do certain things because you waited to the last minute. So, at a worst, you should be starting in year 38. Hopefully you started before then. In terms of, it seems like likely the first point of contact is an engineer, right? And we work with associations, certainly they ask us, who do we recommend? M2E certainly, on the list of recommendations. And you're going to start with that with somebody like Misha. They're going to go through it. They're going to give you scope of work. And then it comes down to, well, who's the contractor going to be? It's something that Misha mentioned. I think what is important too, it's not just, there's a lot of contractors out there. And, licensing is obviously a big issue. You know how many times I've seen sophisticated owners retain unlicensed contractors. People do shady things. I don't know if it's unique to Miami, but it seems to pop up more and more. So at a basic level, make sure the guy's licensed. And that's, obviously something that's easy to check. That's something that as attorneys we check. That's probably the first thing we do is to make sure somebody's licensed. But, beyond that, it's important, this is an important process. It's going to be potentially costly. You want to make sure that your team, right, your team of even management, M2E, perhaps if you have an owner's rep also assisting with the project, you want to make sure that team will work well together, right? And you want to know who is that team. The contractor, like Misha said, contractors are busy. People are going from one contractor entity to another, changing firms. The people that are pitching the contractor at a presentation to the board may not be the people that actually show up and run the project. Yep. And in our industry, I think as we all know, it's who are you actually dealing with? Who are the individuals that you're going to be dealing with? Who is on this contractor team that's going to be the superintendent, right? Who's going to actually be the project manager? Who is the board going to deal with, or who's the property manager going to deal with on a daily basis? You want to know what the actual team is that you're getting, the individuals. I think that's important because, we see it all the time where somebody shows up one day, it's somebody else the next day. And then you want to know how has this contractor worked with your engineer, your owner's rep, your management company in the past? There's obviously, my firm has been involved in, lawsuits between associations and contractors. Engineers have been, part of those claims and those projects. So, it's a small industry. We all know each other. Get references. Ask your engineer, have they worked with this contractor before? What has been your experience? If they didn't get along well in the past project, likely not going to get along well in this project. So that's something that I would recommend to boards to ask those difficult questions. Have you ever been sued, contractor? Who you been sued by? What was the result of that? Are you able to get a bond? Right? Those are important things that boards should be considering, and that's something that as a law firm, those are the types of services and questions we ask on behalf of boards.
Yeah, and those are great golden nuggets that you provided there, Nick. There's, making sure that if they've been sued, if they have the necessary bond, especially on the size of the project, that's something that an association, it's minimal cost in comparison to if something went wrong, if you didn't have a bond. Also, as another nugget for our managers and board members, you can also ask for their workers' comp rates. So you can understand the higher the rate, then that means they've had more workers' comp issues. So there's different questions that you can ask when you're going throughout your process. So let's say we get an engineering report then, and you know, I know your firm has helped recover, and sometimes associations are not aware that they may be able to recover from the insurance side. Could you kind of give our board members and managers alike an idea of some of the claims maybe that you've dealt with when it comes to spalling or other damages that the engineer may have seen in their report or put in their report, and how your firm can help?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of focus right now, obviously, on 40, 50 year. And I think some of the comments building on Misha, Nick just mentioned is that, you know, this process is not something that needs to start at year 38 or 39. This is something that even younger buildings should be planning for, and obviously reserving for and investigating throughout, you know, the life of the building from day one, considering what it's going to take to repair damage to the structure as well as to your finishes. A lot of attention, obviously, in the past has been on pool furniture and putting lipstick on the buildings, and more so than just the structure, unless you were forced to do it. Even when you were being forced to do it, you know, there was this game being played as far as delaying that process. But when it comes to these issues of 40, 50 years certification, there's also a big price tag attached to them. And to avoid the sticker shock on year 39 or 40 or 41, when you're trying to finance this project and your association probably doesn't have the reserves it did on day one, we should consider the timing or notice of the issue. So when the balcony edges started to fall apart or the pool structure started to show signs of failure, that is your first opportunity to potentially offset the future cost or greater expense of repairing those issues by seeking recoveries through your insurance or the insurance of contractors. And I'm sure Nick can talk a little bit more about going through a process. Maybe it's a design issue. So the earlier you're catching these things and investigating these things, the more opportunity you have to avoid the sticker shock of the big number and work on a number that is more palatable over time. So for a lot of associations that may be tuning in now, or managers or board members that are not in year 38 or 39 or 40 or beyond and trying to kind of catch up on it and are in that sticker shock mode, start to consider your notice of the issues and if you ignore it now, what the culmination of that would cost. And so some of the things that we've seen or been able to recover for associations might sound familiar for those that are right now in year 39 or 40 and getting that engineering report and are a bit of a sticker shock with the cost of where those repairs are. Things like spalling concrete, beams that are failing, waterproofing issues around the pool deck areas, or issues with your roof. You know, you're having problems there. You know, even electrical related issues and the need to upgrade your fire system. Maybe there was a claim which required a repair to it, but at that time you could have sought the recovery of ordinance or law coverage under your policy to either cover it or offset the expense. So these are all things that can culminate and cost you so much money if you wait on them. And a lot of people consider, oh, my rates are going to go up, or, you know, I'm going to get dropped. But the reality of it is that most often your rates are predicted or determined based on your loss history or the claims you're having. And more so has to do with the fact that you're just in the South Florida region or in the Florida area where you have a high risk. So it more to do with that than your loss. I've seen associations with a long history of claims, 20, 30 claims in a year, and they're still getting rate reductions. I've seen them get flat rate renewals. It always baffles me when people get deductible phobia, or they're scared of making the claims or seeking the recoveries there. There are opportunities and there are ways to do this stuff, and we have done it and recovered hundreds of millions of dollars for these damages, which we see in reports year 39, 40, 41. And then if you actually start looking back, we realize like 10, 15 years ago was the first notice of it. And we look at the association and go, look, you can't make a claim because your first notice was over a decade ago. There's no real claim to be made here. However, if you're maybe you are in year 39 or 40 and the engineer just found something that your association did not know about, that's your first notice of it. So there may actually be an opportunity to recover for at least some if not all of the damages for that particular issue. That's not to say that everything in your 40-year could be doing. But again, I think this episode of the panel discussion here is talking about planning for these things. So I want to stress, this idea of notice, right? Just make sure as you're seeing these things, consulting the insurance professionals like GlobalPro and discussing these things, as well as, working with your engineer, because making sure that the terminology and the words that you're being used are fitting within the context of your policy if there's a recovery to be seeking. Worth seeking.
Yeah, excellent point, Dan. I mean, it doesn't hurt really to reach out to the professionals to get an understanding of where you stand. You may be able to find, something that you can claim. Last thing you want is try to go at this alone and then realize that you could have had a claim, but now it's too late. So Misha, I wanted to bring it back to you when it comes to the certification process itself. So let's say you put together your report, they're not going to pass the 40-year recertification. Is there a process or a checklist that both board members and managers should keep in mind or should be following?
Well, the point is the following. The actual 40-year certification is done in a pre-printed form that is published by the counties that have it. So whether it's Broward or Dade, you actually have a form you need to fill in, and then you add to that the pictures or comments. So the checklist itself is part of what we submit. The certification goes typically in at least 2 steps, if not 3. Step number 1 is we actually do the inspection itself. And once the inspection is completed, you have a fork in the road. Fork in the road number 1, which is everything is hanky-dory, here is your certification, have a great day. Or to the left, there is certain problems and they need to be addressed. At that point, if you are in year 39 or 39 and a half or 40 plus 1 day, a letter goes to the authority having jurisdiction telling them we did hire an engineer. He did come up with a report. We are asking for an extension because we intend to do these repairs within X amount of time. You are typically granted that extension as long as you show intent to repair. So you cannot go from engineer to engineer and get 90 days plus 90 days plus 90 days. By the way, that's being done. And you cannot let 29 days go by only to ask them at day 30 for another 30 days, although you didn't do anything in the 30 days past. So assuming that there is issues, we generate a drawing, essentially, that is a basis for the bidding of the contractor. That in itself becomes the basis of a contract that the Nick Siegfrieds of this world would then draft so that a contractor is selected. We interview contractor, we walk with them on the site, which should be done. But the key, again, and I know I'm repeating this because it's very important, and we are typically brought in when this goes sideways. An engineer can give you a proposal for a low fee based on just visual observation. This is typically not enough to give the scope that is needed to the contractor. What do contractors do? They then bid based only what the engineer put in his drawings, which is incomplete, knowing full well that on the tail end, the change orders in the undiscovered stuff will make it its worth. They typically underbid, knowing that once that they're on the job, their change orders will make up for it. Mm-hmm. So before even the drawings are done, if your engineer says that he will give you the investigation at a nominal price or at a discounted price because the real meat is the report itself, he's misleading you. You need to actually have enough of a sampling within the building to assert that what you actually put in your drawings, which is the basis for the bid, is worth it. You're going to say, well, that costs money. And I know I say it at every seminar, so I'm going to repeat it this time again. The cost of construction is an order of magnitude higher than the cost of the engineering fees. I'm going to repeat this one more time. The cost of construction is one order of magnitude higher than the fees of the engineer. So if the engineer's a fee are 2, then this is 20. If there are 100, it is 10,000. It is 1,000. You cannot save on the investigation because it's going to come around and punish you at the time of construction. So now, assuming you did your homework right, you have your scope done right, You have your drawings that are accurate. You go to bidding. The engineer, if he's honest and capable, will actually go through a battery of several contractors, give them equal opportunity to bid the work, and will recommend 1, 2, 3 of the ones that are selected for the association to enter in a contract with. That hand-holding is what is important in the role of the engineer in this process. Then once the construction starts, he is there to ascertain that the work is actually done per his drawings. During all this time, the clock is ticking, and the engineer needs to keep the authority having jurisdiction abreast of what is being done, so that there is, again, show intent that you want to make yourself conforming. And once it's done, he issues the certification.
Excellent. Thank you, Misha. And I'm so glad that you brought that point up, because, you know, I like to tell boards, especially when they're going through the engineering process and they're looking at the RFPs, and sometimes you do see a huge discrepancy in price. But the reality is that you need to discover first, as you said, either have multiple samplings or have someone swing from the building to really understand what the current conditions are. The way I like to compare it is if you have an issue with your heart, the doctor doesn't automatically say, let's go into surgery, let's open you up and let's fix that heart. They're going to do stress tests. They're going to do blood tests. They're going to do different kinds of tests. So it's no different with your building. If you know that you could see cracks, it doesn't make sense for them to estimate based on using a binocular, because all they're looking at is the initial crack. That's just the stucco. They haven't been able to get in to really see what the damage is like. So, you know, as using that analogy that you said, it's better to spend that extra money in the beginning, get a strong understanding so you could stay within whatever budget you may have or that you've created. Nick, you know, let's say we get this engineering report and, you know, we need to put together an agreement to be able to present it to the potential contractor. What are the items that you're looking for as a firm to protect the association, to make sure these things are done on time? There's bonds. What items is your firm looking for, or what should boards and managers have top of mind when they're making these decisions to hire a contractor?
So I'll start with this. So I think in terms of when the association is bidding the work, right, when it's got the plans that Misha has talked about, it's best to put together a form contract to send out with those plans, because this way everyone's bidding on the same contract.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's always risk in contracts. So perhaps a contractor, you know, may adjust his price based upon the risk that the association is proposing in the contract. But if you put out the form contract as part of the bid and you say, these are the plans, this is the contract, you want the job or not, right? If you want it, you sign this contract. And this way it's even, everyone's bidding on the same thing. Because what we've seen lately, and partly because contractors are busier and they're declining jobs, is they want to negotiate more on these contracts. And that takes more time, because now it's, well, we got the plans, here's our price, and then now let's negotiate the contract. And then that's a separate process, right? That takes time. They want to negotiate. They're negotiating a lot more because they have leverage now over the association. It's well, these are our terms. If you don't like it, we'll go somewhere else and get better terms with another project.
Yeah.
So I think it's easier to, look, this is the contract. Here it is. We're not going to negotiate. You know, maybe we'll consider some things, okay? But we're not going to get into this month-long, 2-month-long negotiation over terms. We've made it clear to everyone this is the form contract. So I think that's a better way to approach the bidding process. And then, to Misha's point, I think there's always a concern in any of these projects of change orders. I think change orders are, sometimes change orders will happen. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, right? But I've certainly seen and heard of projects, that went from $1 million, all of a sudden it's a $5 million project.
Yeah.
Right? And there may be a valid explanation for it, right? But who wants to actually explain that to the membership? All right? Well, you said, Rafael, you said it was going to be $1 million. How did we get to $5 million here?
Yeah.
Who wants to have that conversation with the unit owners? And we all know there's going to be some unit owners and I've seen it, who are going to think there's, something going on with the engineer and the contractor, and there's something fraudulent, they're making up things, and we really didn't need all this scope, and why are we finding out about this, a year into the project, what's going on, and it just creates havoc for the board. The board has enough, management has enough to deal with, and then you're going to cause this issue because somebody didn't properly define the scope at the beginning of the project. So I agree, spend a little bit extra, get that scope defined as much as possible, but understand, at least in my opinion, there will be change orders. There are unknowns. Like you said, until you start digging into the building, you're not going to know the full scope of the project, right? And that's why in a lot of the contracts for, concrete restoration projects or in stucco work, you're going to have unit prices because the quantities are unknown. Misha will give you a good representation of, okay, this is what we're expecting, but I'm sure he's going to tell you it could be more and likely will be more once we get up there, because you're not going to pay an engineer to look at every single, inch of that building. That will happen when the work is taking place. So the board and the membership need to understand that, yes, we've spent the money, we've got a good scope here, but it could increase, and that's fine, and that's normal in these types of projects when you're doing concrete work and stucco work. It's just the nature of it, and I think that, a lot of this and a lot of what we all do is manage expectations, and that has to be one of the expectations, going into this, that there's a budget here, we believe it's a solid budget, but we also have contingencies going into it. We know there could be a contingency of X, and that's something that Misha can help with. That, look, in our experience, projects like yours, built around the same time, have a contingency of X. Let's budget for that as well. If we don't use it, great. If we use it, well, it was expected.
Rafael,
Misha, you wanted to chime in there?
Yes, actually, I want to chime back to you, because when Nick mentioned the issue of the challenges we deal with, I want to hear from you, because when we approach a board and we say we need X amount of time and dollars to do investigation, and they go, yes, but Peter, Paul, and Mary Engineering said that they can do it for $2 by Tuesday. How do you, from your experience, deal with those challenges?
So I'm glad you brought that up, Misha, because that's something that should be already mentioned earlier on, as Nick stated in the contract. So one of the things that we would recommend from management side to the attorney, which most do put it, is visits, right? So how many visits is a contractor going to have at the property? How many visits is the engineer? So we want to negotiate that into the agreement that they're going to be attending some of these board meetings. A lot of times what you'll find is, as Nick stated, straight to the manager is, hey, I thought it was going to cost this. We're not the ones putting together the cost. We're the ones putting the project together and assisting. Also, boards should consider or must consider having some form of a project manager to deal with these things. As a CAM, yes, we have a responsibility and we have an understanding of what goes on in these projects, but there's no way that we can determine that it was 100 linear feet, 30 linear feet, how many square feet of stucco work, XYZ caps that were removed, caps that weren't removed, and so forth. So to keep it simple, our recommendation would be, number one, make sure that there's a project manager with the engineer that's supervising this project and providing reports. Outline that within your contract with that particular project managing firm or that engineering firm, so that the expectations are clear. If they're going to provide a report weekly, what's the time that report's going to be provided? And also making sure that they're attending either some form of construction meeting or town hall meeting where the membership are there, so that if there are change orders, it's not coming directly from the manager. It's the manager saying, well, there are some change orders. We're going to host a meeting. We're going to communicate to the residents. And the professional that's telling us about these change orders is going to explain why that's necessary. Again, we need to rely heavily on our industry experts. We can't take this load for those managers on the call all on our own. We're not the ones that are doing the project or the experts in that project. Now, Dan, I want to kind of ask you a question. There's a question here I see you wanted to answer, which is basically there's a gentleman named Herbert that asked that his condo is undergoing a certification for almost 2.5 years. The paint and stucco of the building is already completed and it's already starting to peel. How do the owners get assurance that the structural repairs were done correctly?
Yeah, so this
Probably not.
Well, the assurance goes back to that notice issue, right? So you see the issue, and Nick can talk about the contract requirements of that contractor and the obligations of the association to give notice of and the obligation to further investigate those things. So, you know, and working with Nick on this similar situation where we've seen this happen, where there are actually ensuing damages inside the property. There is opportunity to recover for these damages and to avoid any sort of disputes with the contractor. The contractor can come out, is given the opportunity sometimes to even make the repairs and to fix the situation. But this is also, again, something to consider, that just because you're making the repairs as required by the 40 and 50 year, plan for the what if. The what if is that it doesn't go as well as it intended, or you're in the middle of hurricane season and there's a hurricane, which then compounds the issue. And now what once was a couple $1 million project is now, you know, balloons into a 10 or a $20 million project. And now you're dealing with a multi-million-dollar deductible on your wind policy because you sustain hurricane damages. So again, the what if, you got to plan for these things, building contingencies into your contractor's contract. And I am a licensed general contractor as well as a licensed adjuster. So I've been managing projects in the past that have gotten delayed by hurricanes in the hurricane season, and which has led to damages or consequential issues, whether material supplies, you know, suddenly the materials are no longer available. So similar to the issue and the question that's being proposed here, which is, okay, now what do we do if that work was done, it wasn't done well enough? Now we're moving into a whole different set of circumstances and issues, and going beyond the 40 and 50 year, which is really the title of this, I think, of this series. So, but it's, again, something to consider and to talk, you know, to talk out loud and to walk through the property. And I made a recommendation on the last panel about, you know, make sure that you are asking for references and checking into these contractors and their prior work, and, you know, looking for lawsuits that they may have been involved in and what has been alleged there, and, you know, the type of work that they've done, and speak directly to their prior clients and look at the quality of work. I can't tell you how many times we see the same contractor doing the same shoddy work at property after property, and we're dealing with the same type of claims, you know, one property to the next. So I definitely think, you know, make sure that you're qualifying your contractors so you don't end up in that situation. And I think Herbert's question is really for a different type of panel and a different discussion. But I wanted to remark on it because, you know, again, it's something, you know, to go out and vet these contractors a lot. And the reason why we're focused on that is because everyone is so busy right now, and it's hard to get quality contractors. The quality guys are probably already so busy they can't take on more work. So you're working for that second tier or third tier people, or you're willing to wait. Maybe you can wait. Usually you can wait because you've been proactive and you're not on year 39 and a half trying to hit that 40 year, right? So from proactiveness, you won't be waiting on the top guy, right? You'll be planning for that top guy, and you'll get them under contract. You'll have some, you know, you'll have some runway here to be able to get there. You know, and I really want to throw it back to you, Rafael, and talk and ask you about managers involved in those decisions and vetting the contractors. I mean, up front, we're talking about it, you know, at this panel discussion, things you can do up front. What are you doing as property managers? What kind of questions are you asking these contractors? And are you guys doing at Affinity to make sure that your properties are hiring the right people?
Sure. So appreciate you asking me that. So there's multiple things. Number one, we are working closely with the engineers, because the engineers are the ones that understand the quality of work that the contractor is providing. They're like everything else. There's a handful. Our industry is very small. So there's a handful of contractors that we know do provide quality work. And as Nick mentioned earlier in the webinar, it's important to understand that all parties understand each other and can work together. It doesn't mean they have to be buddies, because we're going to disagree in certain points, but ultimately they do need to be able to work together. But things we're looking for is the kind of projects that they've done. You know, you have very large contractors that have done great work, let's say in luxury high rises, but that may not be the contractor for you when you're looking for a garden style property. So we have kind of a bank of, okay, these are our luxury players, these are our A-level players, and there's A-level players, which are more medium-sized firms that are going to cater more to that garden style property. So we distinguish those two. Then from there, we're going to look at, as we mentioned, work with the attorney, seeing what kind of any potential lawsuits that the contractor may have had. We also work with an organization that does the vetting process on our behalf, that confirms the licenses, the insurances, makes sure that are they working with subcontractors? If they are those subcontractors properly insured? Next, we're going to want to make sure who is coming on site. What are the protocols that every association is going to follow? Some are very strict, some are a little bit more lenient. Some boards want to know, have driver license for every single individual that steps foot. If you're going to do that, it's great. However, you have to keep in mind, do you have the team to be able to confirm all that information? If you're a property that just has one on-site manager, that may be a challenge. And lastly was a point that I mentioned before, is asking the contractors within that RFP process of what their workers' comp rate is. That way we get an idea of with regards to their safety protocols that they take. Remember, if someone gets injured in the property, yes, the contractor, you've confirmed that they have the proper liability and the proper insurance, but ultimately everyone's going to be named in that lawsuit because that's just what happens. So we want to see, do they have safety instructors? What are their worker comp rates? Make sure all that's within the agreement. And that way, you know, we're protecting the interest of the association. And I know I said that was the last point, but I did want to bring this point up again, which is the reporting. We want to make sure that the reporting is outlined within the agreement so they understand their expectations. Are they providing reports weekly? When are they due? How many board meetings are they going to attend, or construction meeting, town hall meetings, whatever you want to call them, so that they're there to be able to give the residents an update of what's going on. And as a management company, our responsibility is to decipher that information and provide it to the residents, because we understand most residents will not be attending those meetings. They'll only attend the special assessment one, but either way, we want to communicate what are the next steps and what's going on with the project so that they're aware of it. Misha, I wanted to ask you, when it comes to the 40 years, so we keep mentioning as if, you know, that most buildings are going to get noticed, a majority will. But I do hear, we've had a question here that what happens if they don't get a notice, but they do know that the building is older than 40 or 50 years?
Well, we have been inundated with requests because kind of the municipality that's catching up post Champlain Towers about a lot of things they should have done quicker, better. And instead of giving you notice, the notice is just the final step again of the process. So it's almost like a courtesy notice. By the way, you should know as the owner / manager of a structure that is under the certification process that you should have one at 40 years and every 10 years thereafter. So if they don't send it to you on Tuesday and it's old on Saturday and they send it to you on Friday, they will still ask you to confine by Saturday. So if you know that you're going to need one, if you are a condominium, there is no secret. 40 years from date of substantial completion or beneficial occupancy, you will get that. And if you don't get it, they'll get it to you and say, why didn't you give it to me 2 weeks ago? So anticipate that, plan for it, as Dan said, and Nick reiterated, 2 years is already almost too late.
Yeah. So
assuming that you maintain your building, again, a building is a live thing, which means that you need to keep it, upkeep it and maintain it, which means paint it every 5 to 7 years with high quality paint, address all of the hairline cracks that the stucco has as they occur, not when it starts falling off. Look at possible signs of steel rusting and spalling and address them immediately rather than when some chunk ends on somebody's car or worse on somebody's head. Those are all things that you need to do during the 0 to 35, 36, 37 years. Do not wait until 39 years and 363 days to go, oh, that's what the 40 years certification is. So the point becomes, how do you plan for it? And the fact that you didn't get the summon doesn't mean that you're not responsible for it.
Correct. So with that said, that's a good segue. And I wanted to ask Nick this question. So let's say you're a board, right? And you're dealing with this, you find out this is a $5-10 million project, whatever, something that scares you as a board and a new board takes on. What should that new board do? Because obviously they're assuming the responsibilities of the previous board. You know, what steps should they take and what should they keep in mind if or they've decided to jump on the board because they don't like what the previous board was doing. It was too much of a special assessment. What suggestions do you have?
Well, we saw that before Champlain Towers, where you had a lot of second guessing by non-experts.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I've lived in this building for 30 years. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't know why we got to spend this much money. So, we saw a lot of that. I think, hopefully that will go away.
Or so-called experts.
Right, yeah, so-called experts, right. They took an architectural class in high school, and now they, understand engineering. So, we saw a lot of that before. And we get questions now from boards that are, understandably nervous. What do we got to do? Right? That's a question. The answer is easy. Listen to your engineer.
Yeah.
All right. If he says you got to do it, then do it. That's it. You don't have another choice. You're not the expert. You can't. Your obligation is to rely on the experts. Somebody like M2E, an engineer. They say to do it. You start the steps to do it. And you don't wait, because that's where you can get in trouble. That's where people, could, die or get injured, and that's the scary thing. So as long as a board, you take the steps early as possible, especially if you're a new board, right? If you get a new board, you're the management company, you should get with the new board and say, look, this is where we're at, guys. Yeah. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. And you meet with the professionals, and don't be scared about their fees, because it's going to be a lot more costly later on. Okay? Meet with the professionals, get a game plan going forward, and start immediately. The longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to be, and the more potential liability there is to the board.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. And I want to keep it back with you, because I do want to start going over some of the questions that are popping up. We have here from an anonymous person that's saying, how do they find out if a contractor was sued?
So, there's a number of ways, right? You can ask the contractor, and then you could verify to see if he's lying. So you could certainly ask him, and then you could if you just do a Google search, if you're Miami-Dade, if you just Google Miami-Dade civil case search, the clerk's office website should pop up, and then you could do a name search, and you just type the name of the contractor in, hit search, and you'll see all the cases that contractor has been involved in, if any. And then you can also check his license. You can go on the Florida DBPR license search. You Google that as well. You'll find it. You insert the license number, and you'll check to see if he's licensed. That's one thing. And you'll see if there's any license complaints. So that's two ways to do it. And if you're in Broward, similarly, just type in Broward civil case search, and you'll get the Broward clerk's office website. And it's pretty easy it's all public record, so you could find out.
Yeah, and once you go, if you're a manager or a board member, once you use the site, you will find that it's pretty easy, and you'd be amazed how much you'd find just with Googling the name. But make sure you do check the clerk of courts. One way that you could check as well as a tip is if you request a W-9, do keep in mind that there are certain contractors that have a DBA. So you may not find something with one name, you may find it with the other. So ask for a W-9, and that way, that's a normal request anyway when you're issuing a check. And you can make sure that you're checking from all the organizations. Further, if within your contract you are going to permit subs, you want to make sure that you're also checking the subs as well, because the general contractor could be an amazing person, immaculate record, everything is going great, but however, the subs they hire aren't to that level, and then you're going to find yourself in a very tough situation. So again, relying on your industry experts, as I think all four of us have said throughout these webinars, is what's going to make a big difference here. I have another question here, and I think this may be for you, Misha. Is Miriam asked here, in the case of a hotel converted to a condo, it's 40 to 50 years old from the date of the conversion, or was it when the hotel was built?
When the structure obtained their first beneficial occupancy.
Correct. And I know I've personally have experienced that, especially on the beach, when the market had initially crashed back in 2008. Now you're seeing the reverse. You're going to start seeing condos being terminated. But yes, it is from the date of when the structure is built. We have another question here from Connie asking, what's the responsibility expected from a CAM on a 40, 50-year project? In my opinion, the CAM's responsibility is really to communicate to the board of directors is number one, making them aware of what's going on or what's going to potentially occur. And then from there is to really start putting all the pieces together, putting together the industry experts, the team that's needed to be able to execute on that particular plan. You should be also working with your expert, whoever you decide to hire on the PA side, on the engineering side, on the legal side, on the contracting side, and really get them together and start having your roundtables to understand what are the timelines. We have to manage the expectations the best that we can as a CAM, and we have to make sure that we're communicating any success as well as any challenges with the project to those residents. And lastly, it's also having that strong responsibility on the financial side. And what do I mean by that is if you know you're getting into your 40-year recertification, whether it be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, the time is going to come. So make sure you're staying on top of your accounts receivable, because that's the number one thing that banks are looking at. And just like Dan mentioned, you have insurance companies, you have banks, you have everybody that's looking at, number one, the condition of the building, as well as number two, your receivables. So if you don't have a strong receivables, you're going to find yourself in a tough predicament to get the financing that's necessary for these projects. So the earlier you are taking those steps prior to getting your engineering report, the more you'll understand of what the conditions are going to be able to obtain financing. From my experience, there aren't that many associations that have all the funds readily available to get these projects completely funded, and also have the contingency necessary, as Nick mentioned earlier, so that if you find yourself in those change orders, because they will happen, that you can afford them and not have to ask for another special assessment. Let me see if there's any other questions here. I have here from Jessica, Miami-Dade.gov website shows the information of the clubhouse. It doesn't show the exact year it was built. So they have no idea of finding out. I don't know, Misha, if there's another area they could check of finding out when the structure was built.
I wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know. Yeah, I know we've checked. Yeah, we've kind of.
They can go to they can go to the actual municipality that it's at and try to see to find whether there is a building permit that was for that address.
Okay. All right. Excellent. I have a question here for Dan. Dan, how could a community association, similar to a single family home, save time and money while reaching their 40-year recertification milestones? Like, is there a way of, there's some preventative things that they can do, or kind of guidance? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I've heard me said it a bunch of times, and I think that's, rather than looking at, and unfortunately, looking back at a lot of these associations, man, I wish we had taken a proactive approach. But if you have that opportunity, there's a lot of new buildings, there's a lot of turnover going on right now. There's a lot of new buildings going up that are just starting, right? This is an opportunity for these board members to, obviously learn from past mistakes, take a proactive approach to these things, by, engaging professionals to look at these stuff. Particularly on the insurance market, things are getting very tough, very stringent, but it's running you an extreme amount of cost, right? So it's costing you more money than it's ever before, and you're getting less coverage. Well, that, as it relates to the types of claims that we may be able to even help you navigate through if you sustain damages to the structure of the building over time, such as, the spalling, the concrete edges, and things like that. But again, what's important here is to understand that rather than to avoid that sticker shock and that, massive report and the huge construction project and the scrambling around to try to get the votes and to try to get the understanding of your local municipality and the building inspections department, is to take these things in stride and create a program. I was just visiting an association in Brickell. Building happens to be right around 40 years old. For the last 20 years, they have had a concrete committee that was actually doing literally annual inspections of the properties. And then every so often they would do a sort of seminar on things they were finding and stuff they were going to do for the other fellow unit owners. So there are buildings out there that are taking a proactive approach. And for those, I was talking to the guy about it. I was like, man, do you guys promote that as part of a reason why someone would want to buy here? He's like, in fact, we actually have real estate agents and people asking about what kind of sort of programs do we have for a 5 and a 10 year and a 20-year outlook in these things. So people are actually starting to use these things to kind of edge out their competition and to help with property values in the building to, just really show it. And these are board members taking it, not so much the management companies, but the board members are saying, hey, we want this. And then the management company is saying, okay, this is what it's going to take to do it. And it's really not a huge commitment. He was kind of telling me what they were doing. And it's really just a kind of a spot check around the building. And they've identified some trouble areas. And so they were able to address those things, early on and deal with it. And the reason why I was out there was that one of these issues is just significant and they know they're going to need a lot of money to do it. And it was something they just recently discovered in doing their walkthrough and attaining their 40-year certification, something that did not come up in the prior walkthroughs and things that they saw. So, and we're looking into it. There's some water getting into the concrete areas of the building. Again, there's no contractor to go after. This is, again, damage to the building. The stucco is delaminating. There's definitely some spalling of rebar. So we're investigating, the sort of recovery. One of the other things too, to understand is that, as part of your structure is your seawalls and looking at those areas. And I know there's getting a lot of attention in some of the county park areas where the seawalls are adjacent to or next to newer buildings or even older buildings, and looking at what that means to your structure. And again, I think the 40-year certification is a great thing and definitely is something that you need to comply with and deal with and everything else. But make sure that your evaluation of your property goes beyond that. Because again, you don't want to be kicking the can or fix one thing and ignore something else. We all understand at this point, I'm sure, as board members or as property managers, that the 40-year certification, as we know it today, is really focused on structural and electrical. But as part of those evaluations and inspections and everything else, start to look at other areas of issues that don't balloon into something that you can't put your hands around and you can't get financing for. Banks are becoming so tough. So you are going to need to look for means of, means of actually getting the cash you need to be able to do these things. And a lot of people are on fixed incomes, particularly with these older buildings, baby boomers that came down here, bought their retirement homes. They were comfortable. That's what they needed. They're not expecting the shock of what it's going to take to do these things. So get a plan in place, do what this association was doing already in Brickell. It didn't cost them much of anything. In fact, they had an engineer that was like literally willing to come out every so often just to look at this at no cost to them, just because they knew, the engineer in good faith was doing these things as a way to win their business when they were going to get to something else. Now everyone's busy right now. Who knows if that goodwill is going to continue to extend, but they've benefited from that relationship for many, many years, year after year. So again, just a really solid example of taking a proactive approach. Proactive approach helps you in so many ways. Set the proper expectation with your fellow unit owners, possibilities of obtaining recoveries on your claims through insurance. Smaller loans are needed. So, you obviously don't need as much reserves on hand. Your delinquencies don't become an issue. So many things about that proactive approach to it. And I know, Rafael, we've talked about some associations recently that one that you turned us on to where they're going through a 40-year certification, being terribly managed, and dealing with a horrible situation. They're sustaining more damage now during the 40-year certification construction project than they were prior to even starting the project. So a lot of issues there. And I really think it goes back to just a terrible job of planning and the execution of what they actually needed to get done. If you look at what they started with and what they're doing with now, I mean, the project has ballooned into so much more. So, and it all has to do with that lack of a proactive approach to it.
100%, 100%. Thank you, Dan. So we're wrapping up here. A minute left. I want to give everyone an opportunity to maybe give one or two golden nuggets for our board members and managers. And I'll start with you, Misha.
Ooh, no pressure. First, Dan just made me think about one more thing to add. City of Miami requests a certification specifically for the seawall now for all properties that are on the edge of either the bay or the ocean. So just so you know, that was not before requested, and now they explicitly ask for it. So if you are on the bay, if you are the City of Miami, it will be asked of you. Just be aware of it. Again, be careful. Be careful about being too careful with your budget. In other words, Be sure to spend the money where it's the most useful. In our business, we are sad that it had to come to a Champlain Tower to people to understand that what we were saying for all of this time would actually can come true.
Yeah, very true. Thank you, Misha, so much. Dan, any last golden nuggets?
Yeah, I think transparency. I think a lot of the issues with taking a proactive approach is that you actually have to tell your fellow unit owners what you're actually doing for a lot of these board members, and they don't want to. And also to the idea that you might actually find something and may cost some people money seems not good for a re-election, right? So, yeah. But like with a business or any business, I preach transparency. You should establish the goals. What are the goals of the association, 1, 3, 5, 10 years out? What are you trying to accomplish with your association and how you're going to do it? Post those goals in the, workplace area, whether it's the management office or in the elevators or in the hallways or in the community room. Make sure that your fellow unit owners are aware of what you as elected board members are trying to accomplish during your tenure as either as a board member or when you pass the torch to the next board, that you revise those goals. But so as long as there's a vision there and it's a shared vision amongst your fellow unit owners, you're going to avoid a lot of disputes, a lot of headaches. And when it comes around to that, figuring out what that sticker dollar amount is, it's not going to be so shocking. And they're going to have notice of these issues. It's going to be an open conversation. Invite them to discuss and air their issues and concerns. We obviously do that with our team here at GlobalPro, and I totally encourage associations to start treating your association as a business and add some transparency to it so your fellow neighbors, which are your unit owners, understand what your vision is for the association and where you're going with these things. And I don't think that a lot of these things we're talking about today, the 40 or 50 year, are going to come at really as a shock. And you might actually see people rally around you and really support you in your decisions and what you're doing. And also too, I got to say it, I think it's really important from property value standpoint, particularly for investors, to know what the vision and goals are of the association when they're going in to buy these things or you're going to sell it, and you can point to those things. Hey, this is what my association. It's a sense of pride. It's an opportunity to invite people in, and I think you're definitely going to see a lot of a lot less frustration with it. And I think that's really early on. How many board members were so scared to be a board member?
Yeah,
I think that's weaning, thankfully. But now imagine if all the unit owners actually could clearly see every single day what your vision was for the association.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dan. And last up, Nick.
Yeah, I think what a lot of what we've all been talking about is managing expectations, and I agree with the points that Misha and Dan just made about that. And so, with that being said, I'm also going to answer a question that was asked when I mentioned a form contract that should be sent out to the bidders along with the plans and specs for the project. That's also about managing expectations to the potential contractors. So what that contract is going to have in there is going to have the insurance provision, it's going to have the warranty provision, it's going to have the payment terms, it's going to have the schedule, it's going to have the default provisions, it's going to have the termination provisions, it's going to have a form bond that we expect to receive. So it's going to have all the important provisions that will protect the association going forward. Most importantly is probably insurance. It's a very important provision. That's something that needs to be discussed with the insurance agent to make sure that the appropriate insurance is obtained from the contractor, and that the association is an additional insured in case somebody gets hurt because of the contractor. So that's a very important provision. That's one that we focus on a lot. And if there's claims, in the future for defects, a lot of those claims would be covered by the contractor or subcontractor's insurance. So it's very important that the appropriate insurance is obtained as part of the construction negotiation of the construction contract.
Great, thank you so much, Nick. As for myself, really, it's just boils down to kind of leadership. Being a board member, being a manager, you have tough decisions to make, and being a leader within your community, sometimes those tough decisions need to be made, and that you can't make everyone happy within your community. But knowing that you're doing what's right, using transparency, using communication, then you're going to do what's right for your community as well as doing what's right for your neighbors. So just be a strong leader in the position that you hold, either the manager or your board members. Work with the industry experts like we have here today to give them a call. You know, any industry expert's going to want to be able to help you out. Obviously, we're in a very challenging time right now. People are busy, so we need to give them ample time to be able to respond. But overall, when you're working with experts that understand our industry very well, they're going to want to help you, give you an understanding, and clearly outline what the cost is going to be. As Misha mentioned, you know, there's things that are cheap and there's things that are expensive. You need to find what's the right value for your particular association. But at the end of the day, it's the value that means something. It's not the actual cost. So you have to keep that in mind. With that, I wanted to thank all the board members and managers that were on the call. We hope you got a little bit of an insight on how to get started. M2E is hosting this 12 series seminar. So the next one, we'll go into a deeper dive with regards to the contractors, the challenges that we're seeing in the industry, challenges that we're seeing on the legal side, as well as on the PA side, on the public adjusting side. So we hope you'll join us. I wanted to thank all of you here that are here, our distinguished panel. Thank you, gentlemen, for allowing me to moderate, and thank you for being here today. I also wanted to thank the ladies behind the scene that helped put this together. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Have a great day,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye. Stay safe.